All right, we'd like to welcome our next guest, S.A. Ernster, also known as Shelby, first-time author of Dierock 88. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Been looking forward to it. Been a
Cool.
bit of a wait.
Yeah, well, nobody would know this, but we originally scheduled the interview for the 13th of July. And just as I was plugging in the computer, well, everybody knows what happened on the 13th. So
Yeah,
moving past that. So I appreciate you coming on. It's great to have you. And
absolutely.
I got my hands on a copy of the book. All right. So Dierock 88, Cosmonauty. This is book one. Yep. So
Book
according
one.
book one. So first of all, I guess I should say congratulations to you.
Thank
That's
you.
not an easy task to write a book or
It's gosh, it's as hard. It's as hard as you think it is, and somehow harder.
and then even harder, not only to write a book, but to finish it, not only to finish it, but to publish it, not only publish it, to try to figure out how to sell it and promote it. So
That last part's the hardest.
though I look forward to talking about it and hearing about it. So we've got the paperback version at Amazon. We've got a hardback version, which is pretty cool. I picked up a paperback version of it June 21st. And so it's not only is it a big task, a 500 plus word book, but you've challenged yourself to write apparently additional 500 plus word books that are set to follow, I guess, in the series.
Yeah, so I think I'm at the 150K mark for words on book two.
Mm-hmm.
Just the first draft. It's been slow going because I got a new job in the process that just really cut into my writing time. But
Mm.
almost done with that first draft, and then I go into the editing process. And then I've got like another book on the side that's probably around 40,000 words, and tons of other projects that the word count doesn't really matter because it's way too early in the process. But you can't just focus on one thing. You got to have a billion going on, apparently.
You're all over the place. So
Yeah.
give us a breakdown. Tell me about Dierock 88. Give me the kind of the back of the book synopsis. What's the story about?
Yeah. Dierock 88, I think it's probably best considered first off maybe young adult because the main character's like 17, right? So um and it's a young man who is in this kind of blue collar work environment in space. It's all he's known. He lives with his dad, and his whole world just gets upended when his dad is arrested and accused of being this terrorist from years past. And he's then his life is then sold away to this corporation that does all different mining for resources on um, moons and asteroids and things like that. And he gets sent to a camp where they are essentially mining under the ground of this distant moon. And in his time there, he's dealing with these allegations against his father not being who he thought he was, or maybe it's all a lie. And then he's kind of thrust into this group of people that don't quite mesh well together. And then there's this secret organization that's trying to reach out to him that he doesn't quite understand what they want with him.
This is Vanguard.
Yep, Vanguard. And then also trying to survive the dire work conditions. You know, there's these mysterious beings under the surface that they have to contend with while they're working. So there's kind of a lot of questions in book one. And the main character Atlas is just forced to manage all of this while also trying to figure out the truth of who he is, who his father is. And I would say I think that's probably the best. It's hard to give synopsis, but I think that's the best one I could give as far as without spoiling too much.
Yeah. So this is actually, whenever I see like a new writer or online, generally on, I don't know, on X, on Twitter, I'm always super excited, and I want to like buy the book and read it and find some young new talent. So I'm actually really impressed and surprised. The book is so well written. It's really good. I mean, you're really really a talented writer, and I think it's a great bit of writing here. Why science fiction? Why did you choose science fiction, or did it choose you?
Yeah, I think maybe it chose me. I always thought if I did conquer the dream of writing, I'd probably start off with fantasy because it's a bit easier, right? It deals with stuff that's maybe more um, easier to imagine.
Sure.
And I had a fantasy story outlined pretty well and a world built for it, and I was trying to write it, and I just wasn't getting anywhere. And I somewhere um, in like my documents of failed writing attempts, I had one that I had started and had envisioned fairly well, but never got past like the opening few paragraphs, and I just thought I needed a break, and so I found this old story I had started sometime in the past and just started writing, and for some reason it just started flowing a lot better than the what I was trying to work on,
Yeah.
and I got really into it, and I've probably always liked sci-fi more than fantasy. That although I do love fantasy more, just from like my youth, I read a lot more sci-fi.
Yeah.
Um, and So I think it was just more happenstance. It just what was what came to me at that time. I've got so many stories that I want to get out of my head, but that's the one that just came out.
So tell me about the process. You say you have stories floating around in your head. How does it begin? Does it begin with a character? Does it begin with Atlas? Does it begin with an idea? Does it begin with an image, or do you have a couple of characters
Yeah,
that kind of floating around in your mind? And
it's a bit of all of that. I've always been ideas kind of just strike me. It's like lightning in my head, and I've got to I'll be trying to sleep and I don't sleep well, but I'll be laying in bed and I get an idea and I've got to like pull my phone out and note it down. Or I'm at work and just lost in like a podcast, just doing some kind of medial tasks, and
right.
um, they just come to me, and I gotta note them down as quick as I can. So it can be things like images of a scenery, or maybe a certain type of character that's typically inspired by like history, right? I read and listen to a lot of historical podcasts and read a lot of history books.
Yeah.
Um, so just things like that. I have a very active imagination. I always have since I was a kid. And they just come to me. It's probably the easiest part of my writing career is getting ideas. It's more the time to get them down rather.
Well, where do you get the time? Because so many people, you're a you work, you're a mother. That's several full-time jobs right there.
Yeah,
So many people, it seems that one of the things preventing them is, yeah, I got to work. Okay, yeah, I have a family. It's very difficult for me to find time to dedicate to this, artistic outlet. I mean, when do I sit down? When do I write? How have you been able to manage that?
that's the tough part for sure. Because I work overnights so that I can watch my son during the day. Yeah, I didn't want to send him to daycare. I get to spend every day with him, which is great.
That is
But it
great.
also means that I'm very, very tired. So when he's sleeping, I kind of want to be sleeping too.
Sure.
Um, so whenever I'm writing, I'm essentially sacrificing other time, and that's generally sleep.
Okay.
I used to play video games very heavily. I'm lucky to get 2 hours a month now because it's just not the most productive use of my time anymore. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, I have to. Sometimes I get home at 1 in the morning and I shower, turn on my computer, and I write for like an hour. And I usually only get it's probably not even like but 1,000 words, but it's something. Or I have to wait till the weekend when I have other people that can watch my son, and then once he goes to bed, then I can get some writing done, or I'll just wake up earlier than usual, maybe at like 2 in the morning or something, and that's really all it is. It's just sacrificing other time that's there. But it has slowed, with my job. It's like I'm lucky if I get a 1 to 2,000 words a week at this rate, but it's getting there slowly.
So, in the same way that cigars are never just cigars, right? Science fiction are short stories that are set in interstellar space, are rarely about space. Okay. So, to be sure, there are straight space stories, they do exist. It's a kind of a spaghetti western, but set somewhere out there in the cosmos, like a Buck Rogers kicking it at the edge of the Oort cloud with his band of merry men or something. But I think that that's a genre of science fiction that they call space opera. It's just straight space story. But I think more
Right.
commonly, and of course, I think more compellingly, is for me is are the stories where the protagonist takes a journey into outer space. True, but space functions as a kind of incidental to the real story. So such that the journey into outer space is a pretext to explore a journey into inner space. It's, I guess, to say it's a
Yeah.
philosophical
Okay.
journey or a quest of self-discovery. And in Dostoevsky's words, this is like addressing the accursed questions, the inevitable kind of death, existence, God, nature of man, that type of thing. So it seems that this is the case for Atlas, I think, particularly as he descends into the caverns of Dierock and experiences some sort of unsettling disturbances of the mind when he's confronting the ancient cosmonauty there. It's a sort of a science fiction genre unto itself. What is the as he's going through his journey, his journey outside, his journey inside? What is the message or the takeaway here?
Well, I think for Atlas, it's about having um, things in his life spiraling out of control that he can't really um, grasp onto. It's not stuff that he can control. It's not stuff that he could have predicted. It feels very unfair, and it's happening at a very important stage of his growth as a young man, as a person, and learning how to deal with that, and also balance the things that he always wanted. Right? If you remember in the early parts of the book, he very desperately wanted to get out and explore the galaxy and see everything that he'd never
Sure.
seen before with his own eyes. Um, and obviously, he's you know that's still possible for him in his life, but it's like may not happen in the way that he expected, right? Because it's all of a sudden he's ripped away from his choice and what freedom that he didn't realize he kind of already had,
Yeah.
and sentenced to working away a debt.
Hard
Uh,
labor.
yeah, on Dierock. So I want my there's a lot of themes going into it that I had in mind. I kind of wanted to focus on the character arc of someone that uh, has to really dig in deep and figure out who they are, in a life that perhaps isn't being fair to them, but also that process of a young man having to be hardened by his environment, which is a unique challenge because obviously I've never been a young man, so I'm ready, and it was a very, very foreign mindset to have to try to get a hold of. But so I think there's some of that. I grew up reading a lot of war memoirs as a kid, so
Yeah.
I think that was an element that I always wanted to capture was these young men that are, right out of high school going into Vietnam and throwing their whole lives, and completely changed their whole outlook. So that plays a part into it, and then also, like you already mentioned, as they get out and see more of the world that they're in, exploring how that aids in that those changes and who they've become.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny too because I was going to mention that you probably seen the 1997 film As Good as It Gets with Jack Nicholson, whose character is
Yeah.
asked, how do you write women so well? And his response now is this sort of infamous, I think of a man and I take away reason and accountability. So your main character, Atlas, is a man. So as a female writer, how do you write a male character?
Oh, that was the scariest part going into writing. Because um, I've only read from the perspective of a lot of males in these kind of environments, and it's
Sure,
you can't really take away the fact that I'm a woman. Like my mindset's always going to be feminine. I'm always going to be thinking about things from the place of a woman. Like there's nothing I can do about that.
sure,
So the best that I could really do is try to remind myself, because I went into writing Dierock 88 not really knowing what I'm doing, so I didn't have like a lot of data readers to overlook it and tell me if like Alice sounds too much like a girl. And the
is my
feedback for the most part has been good, but
yeah, is my main character too soft, too emotional? Am I
yeah,
okay? Is this all right?
yeah. And
Well, this
some
is
of the emotion is intentional. I did have one person's like, yeah, he cries too much. I'm like, okay, I mean, I probably cry too much too, so that's probably where that comes from. Some of
hey,
that emotion is intentional because I wanted him to have to like, you know, shake off that part of himself.
sure.
Um, but uh, the best I could really do is like constantly asking myself, think about like just the guys that I do know and the men that I've read about, and ask myself how would they have handled this situation. And then also try to remind myself that he is like a teenage boy. That's really all you can do.
Mm.
I'm never going to be able to shake the fact that I'm a woman writing a male character, and so there's probably always going to be some kind of wall there. Um, I do hope that I get enough feedback where if there's anything like very consistent that I did wrong, I can improve that going forward. But it was hard, and it was the most challenging aspect of writing it for sure.
Well, it's interesting because once you're done, I know that in the back, let me see, in the back of the book, you have the kind of author's notes and acknowledgement, and you describe some of the editing process, the editing process there. But once you release it out into the world, what's your view? Is it, if you get feedback after the fact, you think, I mean, you can't do the director's cut later and go back and change it,
Right.
right? So it's always,
Yeah, I wouldn't want to, even if I could, But
yeah, yeah. So there must be a lot of hesitation, like, okay, and we haven't even really even addressed your writing process, which I want to do, but so I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. But to have like you're sitting on something and like, is it done? I don't know. Is it done? Is it done? Is it, what else should I do? Like, what do I change
right.
a one word back and forth, and then like, shit, I'm just keep rewriting the same sentence. I think it's done. Let's just put it out into the world.
Yeah, that. So I went back and forth on that several times. What I will say is that when I was done, it was more of like I'm ready to be done,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
even if it's not done.
yeah. This is
Because
done. We're done.
yeah,
Let it
you
rip.
can. The first book, one of the challenges is not rushing yourself. I think I always feel like I rush myself. I like to think if I had given myself more time, had been more patient with myself as a writer, saved up more money for another so I could send it back to my development editor after the first review from her.
Yeah.
Maybe it would be even better. But I can't play that game with myself too much. It's my first book, and it's what's done is done. But uh, it, I would say up to the first draft, oh, it's done. It's so good. And then you send it to the development editor, and she just picks it apart, and she's like, no, this is what you need to do. This is how you write. And then
Like
you're like, oh, I've got a long way to go.
you're like, oh
And then
my
when you're
God,
done with
I thought I was done. I'm just
it,
barely getting
yeah.
started. Back to the drawing board.
It's brutal. It's brutal. They a good development editor will bring you back down to earth really quickly.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Speaking of tears, of course. Um, so in Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche just identifies three types of thinking or philosophizing, and I think artistic production generally. And so the names of these are very difficult to pronounce. Ganjastro Tagati, um, So the three different types are, one is flowing like the Ganges. So there's just thought, art pours out like a river. And in the case of, for example, Joan Baez says of Bob Dylan, that songs would just come out of him like a ticker tape, like just constant flow, 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 flow. Okay. The next style of thought or creativity that Nietzsche identified is the Kurmagari, which is to produce like a tortoise. A tortoise speed, it's thorough, but it's slow. Okay, so for example, like you put out one album every 5, 10 years or something like that. It's a banger, right? But it's just slow in the process. The third is that he identified as the thinking or writing production style of Mandu Kagati, which in this case is, we'll imagine the frog. So we'll take a leap, then he sits there a while. He appears to be doing nothing. Maybe he's dead. I don't know. And then there's another leap. Okay, another burst of productivity. So, in your own case, your own writing style, does it just sort of flow out? Do you write a sentence, rewrite it, like excruciatingly slow production, or is it just like happen in spurts?
So flow and spurts with those, like the leap, those would both describe me. So when I'm writing and I'm feeling it, it's just flowing. I don't really have to think on things too much. It comes to
Mm.
me. I'm picturing the scene. I'm very much in tune with what I need the characters to do and say, and what needs to happen. But then, especially because I have such little time to write, um, there's like large gaps in my flow.
Okay.
So it is like leaps of productivity in that sense because it takes time for me to get into that zone of writing.
Yes.
And since I'm like maybe writing once or twice a week, my mind just really can't be on my writing very often. So there's times when I have time to finally write and I sit down and I just can't go anywhere.
Mm,
And so I'll
mm.
have a week where nothing gets done. And then once I finally am able to just sit down and find that flow again, then it comes out. But so it's mostly flow, but due to my circumstances, it kind of feels like the leaping as well.
Due to external circumstances more than anything else.
Yeah,
If
for sure.
you had a certain, I don't know, if your son was a little older, he's in school all day, and you didn't have to work, your production style could easily be just nonstop flow.
I think so. Yeah, I reckon I could write a lot of books at that kind of time. I like to think I could, anyways. We never know, but maybe I
Mm,
just maybe we all think that, and then if we have that
mm.
time, it turns out we aligned ourselves. But
I think it's interesting what you mentioned, and I feel it to be true for myself. Um, Getting into the mindset, getting into the flow state. To me, it's almost like, I'm not sure if you've ever been diving or anything, but there's a kind of like an initial descent that's, you know, difficult to get to depth sometimes. And if there's an interruption or a current or anything like that, then it becomes challenging. So it's like in my own mind, and in times when I've written or been writing a little bit of a longer piece, the first 10, 15 minutes are just utter garbage. Like I've not descended somewhere. It's like sleep, maybe. There's light sleep, but you don't actually feel refreshed and good until you've descended into REM sleep, deep sleep. And then you're ramming or whatever like that. Your eyeballs are moving behind your eyelids and everything else. You're getting real sleep there. So I feel like for me, the creative process is something like that. Like if I'm writing, garbage, garbage, crap, deeper, 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 deeper. I'm in the REM state of creativity, whatever that means. And now things are good, but if there's a phone call, eep, I'm back out of it. Or someone comes in the room like, hey, where's this, where's that? I can't find the thing. And so like it'll pull you back out. You wake up, you come out of that deep productive flow state. Do you find anything like that?
yeah. Oh yeah, actually, that I think your sleep analogy works really well. A lot of the times, especially because of the big gaps in between my writing, when I first start to write,
Yeah.
um, I'm not in the mood. Now it's struggling to come out. I'm already like I'm getting frustrated, but I have to force myself to keep going because I know once I get past like those opening few paragraphs of whatever scene I'm writing,
Yeah.
it's gonna start to flow and I'm gonna be in the zone again and everything's fine. So that's a really good way of putting it, and that's exactly how it is for me as well.
Yeah. So, like, the meta language of writing, I think, is something that's a little bit unexplored. The meta language, we have common jargon or meta language for literature. For example, words like plot and character or setting and conflict and other things like that, which is sort of the necessary ingredients to crafting any successful story or following these kind of uh, you know general plot lines. And Gustav Freytag sort of famously developed a 5 act dramatic structure, which is called the Freytag's pyramid. And you get the sort of conflict, rising introduction, rising conflict, the point of highest peak, and then resolution, and then denouement, or whatever he calls it. So, um, to me, I have a kind of a sense of another um, force, which is sort of at play there. And so the it goes like this. So I'll tell you, and you see if it makes any sense to you. Um, I see as sort of a necessary ingredient to crafting a successful story or a great piece of literature is a balancing of two sometimes competing elements that, for lack of a better label, I could call X and Y. So X and Y. Okay. The X that I'm referring to is just the basic plot of the story. Okay, this is what happens. All right, what happens in the story? So break it down. Tell me the story. So it's whatever you can put on his little plot pyramid. It's what Joseph Campbell defines as the monomyth. It's a hero's journey. It's some goal-oriented protagonist confronts obstacles, overcomes them, and as a result reaps the reward. So that's the X. It's what happens in the story. Now, in my opinion, what sets a good story apart from a great story is the why, or also known as, you could say, WH, the why. So, what's the point of the story? So, like, why did you bother to write it, or why did you take the time to write it, or why should I take the time to read it, right? So if it's just merely spectacle, all right. So as a reader, are they supposed to learn anything from it, or or is it just like, if a story on the one hand is pure X, then you're basically just cranking out the next installment of the Fast and Furious franchise. There's no meaning. It has no meaning. It's just spectacle. It's just X, a story and action, 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 action. On the other hand, if the piece is pure or heavily oriented towards why, then it's like reading a manifesto or something, and it's kind of ham-handed or heavy-handed. It comes off as preachy in a way. Like it's too transparent. You're sort of seeing like the message of, like, I don't know, climate change or society, some message. So in my opinion, sort of marrying the X and the Y together, that you have something of meaning embedded into a very good story. I have the sense that these two things are sort of struggling with each other. Um, what do you find are some struggles that you have? Or are there sort of struggles like, this is what I want to happen in the story, or this is what I want the characters to experience, but how do I make a plot line for that? Like, I need the character over here, and how do I get him over there? Or like, how do I do it in a credible way? What are some of the challenges that you have as a writer putting together the story?
Um, Gosh, well, that's definitely the challenge. Really, is there's so in the writing world, there's like people that are really strict outliners,
Okay.
where they can plot the entire story start to finish and they stick to it and then get really detailed as to like what it needs to hit along the way. And then there's people maybe more like Stephen King famously that are just pantsers, where they're gonna let the story and the characters take them where they will and try to put characters in different situations to figure out how they react like they don't actually know themselves.
Yeah.
Um, and normally, to you kind of have to blend the two. You can't, you probably aren't going to write a very good book if you're just pantsing.
Yeah.
Um, but for me, I have a hard time like outlining start to finish without having any changes. I have to let the story and the characters figure out where they're going on their own. And
Okay.
so my outlines have to be very loose. Like I know what needs to happen. I know what's true in the world. but I don't necessarily know how they're going to get there
Okay.
all the
And
time.
this comes out as you're writing. So
Yeah, yeah. So when I wrote Dierock 88, I had a super loose outline. Like I really pantsed that entire book and it really didn't come together until the end of it. Like I had ideas of things that were in the world and that had to happen, um, but really no idea all that was going to be unveiled within it.
okay.
Now, as I write the second book, I've learned a bit more as an author. I realize that you really need to outline, even if it's very loose, which it has to be for me. Otherwise, I'm not going to write well. I just write better if I'm letting the characters kind of figure out how they're getting from point A to point B.
Okay.
Um,
So you're sitting down
and
and it's just happening to you. You're watching it unfold sort of as a reader
yeah,
might.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I kind of go into a scene with, okay, these things need to happen. This is where they're at, and then I go from there. It's like I have to let the character show me how those happens, how they get to those things. And sometimes
Interesting.
you reach a point where they take you in a different direction, and if I can reason it with the storyline, then I'll let it happen. If I can't, then I put it aside and I come back to it later.
Mm. That's interesting because it seems very efficient if you already have it all plotted out. You already know exactly what
Yeah,
they kind of need
right.
to
It'd be
do.
nice.
Yeah. And so you're like, I need, Atlas to do this so that he can go here, so that this happens. You drop a little foreshadowing here and there.
But
And see, that's something as well as that, as you're moving through the story, do you write it chronologically? You write the beginning first? Do you just write?
yeah, I prefer to write chronologically. It's not always possible. Obviously, you're gonna have to go back and add things and change things. So, especially if you have like multiple characters, you're gonna have to. You might be seeing one character's storyline better than the other, but yeah, that's my preference because I let the characters this in some way decide a little bit about how the story plays out. I kind of have to write it in order. Um, but I do have to break that sometimes to but and I should note that I know how it's going to end. I just don't know the details of it.
Yeah. So there's a general arc. This is where it begins. This is where it ends. And
Yeah,
and in the
very loose
case,
outline.
like if what complicates it further is that this is book one of a larger, longer story. So there must be a kind of a sense of like, what should I include in book one? What is
Yeah,
to be reserved for book two? How do I set up book two and still have a satisfying ending in book one? So, I mean, you're dealing with a lot of, I mean, for a first time writer, that's a lot to consider. Did you go to anyone to discuss like, how do I write? What do I do? How does this actually work?
um,
Or did you just sit down and be like, I'm
I
writing a book. Let's do it.
so I'm the type of person that I skip the tutorial. I just jump right
Like
into the fire, and for better or for
instructions,
worse.
trash it. Let's get
Yeah,
right in. Open the
yeah.
box.
I just go in, and
Good.
that's obviously got a lot of faults, but that's how I operate. And I didn't know anybody to ask about books. I tried or about writing. I tried watching like YouTube videos.
Yeah.
There's like Brandon Anderson has like tons of lectures. I couldn't get into them. It just wasn't for me. Um, and eventually I realized that I'm not going to get anywhere until I just sit down and write. And you have to forgive yourself going
Yeah.
into it for like how awful it's going to be because it is going to be awful unless you're like you know the next J.R. Tolkien or something.
Yeah.
It's just going to be really bad. And it was, but once I started going and I committed so much time into it, I realized that it's like, okay, I'm kind of in this now. I need to put in the work to make it good, making something people want to read. And even
Mm.
then, so when I thought Dierock was finished at like 70,000 words, I sent it to a dev editor that I found on Twitter, and she's the one I credit with teaching me how to write. With her breakdown of my story, she was like, okay, your ending needs to be like the opening of book two. Your beginning needs to be like 20,000 or so words longer, and then take a little sooner in the story. And she's like, you need to learn how to start paragraphs correctly. It just she said. And then she sent me a bunch of resources like books to read from that were on specific things as a writer to improve and how to do so. and I took that very, very seriously. And it's improved my writing
Th-
significantly.
This is
The
your
book would not be good
this is the
otherwise. Yeah.
your editor, Karen McKellar.
Yes. Yep. Karen McKellar.
Give her a shout out
Um,
here.
yeah, she's great. I just found her by chance on Twitter. I was really nervous about searching for an editor because there's like obviously, I didn't know what the field would be like with all of the, very, I hate to use the term woke, but like that's what it is, right? I
Sure.
didn't want to find an editor that's like, yeah, your characters aren't gay or black enough or something. So
Yeah, yeah.
I,
Tell
I
me
had no
about it.
idea. Like I was just jumping right in. I didn't know what that field would look like, and I think I hit a hashtag called like hashtag am editing,
Okay.
and I saw her looking for clients, and she just seemed like a normal person, and I think she's in Scotland.
Yeah. Well,
Her
that's a
website,
great quality. Normal people.
yeah, she seemed normal.
Do they even
She seemed
exist
like a good
anymore?
person, right?
Yeah.
And so I just went to her website and I sent her the manuscript, and she's very affordable, and yeah, I I went into the process not knowing how to do anything, and a large part of what I did learn, I learned from her feedback.
Interesting.
Um,
Interesting.
and I think if I could have afforded right off the bat to send it right back to her, like once I had done making all the changes she suggested, um, I think it would have been even better.
When did you first realize that you had words floating around in your brain?
Oh,
When did that begin?
since I was a kid, I've been trying to write since I was like, I don't know, in elementary school. I always loved to read. Um, it was Reading was an escape for me,
Yeah.
and like I said, I just had a very active imagination, and I was always very. Most of my life I've read more nonfiction than fiction.
Yes.
Not because I don't enjoy fiction, but because I was always very frustrated with characters and decisions they make, and like nothing ever went the way I wanted them to. And nonfiction is just different. It's what inspires me. It's where I draw from as far as because that's stuff that actually happens and
Mm.
has happened, and they're real people, and that's what I want to mimic when I write my fiction. I want to write stuff that makes people think that like this is alive, this is real.
This is
This could
realistic
be somebody
and
I could know. Yeah,
yeah. So it was a kind of a refuge
and
then. Books were a bit of an escape or a refuge as a child.
very much, very much. Yeah, I needed a place to spend my mind as a kid, and because I had a pretty chaotic upbringing, and
Okay.
so the best way to handle that was to just lock myself in my room with a book, every night.
Interesting. That's very interesting. What is your first memory as a child, as a little kid? Do you have a first memory?
Yes, it was my very first memory was actually that I can recall was looking out a window at like just the snow-covered fields on the road and seeing like a snowman somebody had made. And my mom swears that this was when we were in Germany, but I feel like that's awfully young to have a memory, so I don't know.
Huh.
Yeah,
Interesting. Interesting.
I've never had someone ask me that.
Looking out a window. What were you looking
Yeah,
at?
same. Just snow. There was a car going by, and I remember seeing a snowman. Yeah, that's
Snowman.
that. And I for some reason I've always known like yeah, that's like the farthest back I can remember. I've never second guessed that. I've just always known that that's my first memory.
Interesting.
Weird thing to think about.
Would you say that you had a happy childhood growing up? Do you feel you said a sense of
Uh,
chaos?
no, no, it was uh, a chaotic childhood, and one with I had a lot of stepfathers and just moved around a lot. I think I went to 14 different schools, lived
Good
in
Lord.
4 different states. Yeah, gosh,
Well,
it was chaotic.
yeah, that's very difficult. That's very difficult. There's always this sort of I'm not intending to pry or to play psychoanalysis
You're
on you or anything like that. It's just so I'm always very curious about the what I would call like the origin story, a person's origin
sure,
story, because it doesn't come out of nowhere. It happens. I sense that it happens for a reason. that somewhere in the course or the events of your of a person's life, um, the notion of language comes up as a significant. People are drawn to sort of the world of language and in my own case, I was run over by as a child. I was run over by a car. I spent a lot of time in the hospital. I was in traction, and I mean, there's not a lot to do if you're just hanging out in the hospital, on the mend. So I just read a tremendous amount of at that time. So, and then obviously after I got out, took a long time to recover and was limping around. I was basically retarded. So, your career in football is kind of not really taking off there. So like I that sort of marked me as a kid in a way, and I was sort of retreated into the refuge of words and books and things of that nature. So um, I've always felt there was a sort of a connection there. Um, uh, 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 it took a car to move me from my physical self into my verbal word self. And so that's very interesting. What sort of work, writing and things, authors have inspired you that you've enjoyed over the course of your life most?
Yeah. Well, first off, I definitely hear you on what you're saying regarding on seeking out the world of the word. And that's essentially what I had growing up was seeking out I see writing as a release for the soul in some sense.
Sure.
But yeah,
It's
I
like
would say
you get pinched in
yeah,
some way. It's kind of a therapy or it's sort of a
it is
release.
therapy.
Yeah,
It's the oldest form of therapy next to like physical work, right? You know, everyone talks about
sure.
the gym is a sense of therapy from going to the gym every day. And writing's that same thing. You know, you've got vets that have went on to become really good writers, especially like World War I vets. Um, and then even today, it can also just be for people that perhaps had a lot to say but never had the voice to give to it. So yeah, writing's a very much a release in that sense and a form of therapy. But um, I would so authors as far as fiction goes, the first one is probably oh gosh, I'm blanking on her name, but I think it's Esther or something. But the writer of Johnny Tremaine is a big one. Um, Johnny Tremaine was like a old, it might have been written in like the 40s, 50s book, taking place during the American Revolution, and it just follows this young boy who um, is an orphan and is working as a blacksmith apprentice, and he melts part of his hand together,
Oh
and
wow.
essentially just can't find work after that, and he just falls in with basically like the Sons of Liberty, and that book I always credit for launching. I already had some interest in history as a kid, but when I read that book, it like cemented it.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I was just like, I need to learn everything there is to know about the American Revolution. This is the coolest stuff ever.
Interesting.
So I own like a very old, I believe it's first edition of Johnny Tremaine because that book had such a big impact on me. Um, and then the other one was probably Jurassic Park. So Michael Crichton obviously is a pretty famous, well-loved author, but that was the first adult novel that I tried to read
Yeah.
as a kid. Um, and it just blew my mind. Like I really liked the movies as a kid, and so I was like, you know what, let's try Jurassic Park. I don't, I can't, it can't be that, that hard for me.
Yeah.
I read a lot of books, and it just it had a big impact. It made me feel like it opened up a whole new world of literature
Okay.
for me because I was like, wow, this is what people are reading outside of young adult literature, or middle
Right.
grade literature rather. So those are the two big ones, just from the perspective of reading. Writing's different. I don't know that there's fictional writers that have inspired me too much. Other than maybe like I really like Jeff Wheeler work, his work on he a lot of fantasy books.
Yeah.
And what I like about him is his books aren't, um, they're not grim dark. He's got very good characters that are good people and um, very Christian inspired, which I really like because I don't think a lot of authors have the guts to do that these days.
Sure.
And he's very, and it's not like too obvious or on the nose. It's just like his fantasy world has very faith based, and he paints it as a good thing. It's not like the church is evil.
Yeah.
So that I always really appreciate it. And he also wrote a female character that I didn't hate in fantasy, which is apparently for
Rare.
some reason it's hard to find. Like, and it was a
What?
guy that wrote it. So,
Interesting. Maybe he just took away reason and accountability. What did you
yeah.
why do you generally hate the female characters in science fiction books or books that you've read? What's the problem? Why did they get wrong?
Oh gosh, they're excuse my language, but they're bitches. Usually
Okay.
is like the biggest problem. It's just
Are they brat?
they're
Like Kamala
yeah,
Harris, they're brat, are they?
yeah, they're bright, whatever that means.
I don't even know. I
But
don't want to
I
know.
don't know. I don't want to know. I think so. What I found, especially in fantasy, I don't know that I've read too many sci-fi with female uh, heroines, but I found that they're usually well, part of the problem is that they're written by women, right?
Yeah.
And I think women tend to we all and guys probably do the same thing, but you use your main character sometimes as like wishful thinking. And I think a lot of women fall into that trap where they're female characters like them, like striking out against
The
men, and so they're really
patriarchy.
yeah, like they're too like they're trying to be masculine, but when women try to be masculine, it's there's a reason why it's unlikable, right? Like a lot of women complain about, well, when guys act like this, it's fine. And when women do it, it's like, yeah, there's a reason. It's because you're a woman acting like a guy, and there's a difference there, and it's there for a reason.
Yeah.
Um, so that's the biggest thing is you get these females that are trying to have this masculine attitude, and we don't like it because deep down we all know that's not endearing, right?
Yeah.
Um,
It doesn't seem authentic either. It's sort of
yeah, exactly. It's that girl boss attitude, right?
yeah.
And so that's so prevalent in female main characters in fantasy today. There's some older ones that I read as a kid that kind of avoid that. There's even one that I recall. I think it was like a Tamora Pierce novel, and
Okay.
the female actually even dresses up like a boy. And I read this when I was a kid,
Mm.
and she still came off as more likable than like modern female um, characters written by the dominating female
Mm.
authors in the fantasy world right now. But
I think
yeah,
that
they're just
that to me
I don't know.
strikes.
I hope that answered.
Go ahead, please. I'm sorry, I've interrupted.
Oh, you're good. I was just saying. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I feel like that's an example to me of an unsuccessful merger of the X and the Y. The Y of like you're trying to make a statement about a character. There's a woman, she's a girl boss. So like you have a kind of a I don't know, your intention the a, a person's intention with the character, it doesn't fit into the natural course of the story. It stands out as like
Right.
I can see behind the curtain. I see what rather than just be absorbed in a natural character which is moving through the
Right.
story and does things like it's another example of like rather than you're showing rather than telling, right? My character's
Yeah.
angry. Okay, well you can't just say your character's angry. I don't believe you. Show me what does it look like to
Right.
have, what does an angry character look like? And so the
Yep.
whole story of them is just like telling you what the character's supposed to be doing or thinking and all the rest, but rather an unsuccessful blending and to my mind, an unsuccessful blending of the X and the Y factors.
Yeah. Exactly. Because it's a lot of it is denying reason. Like we all know that women are a certain way and guys are a certain way. So you're trying to fit some triangle into a
Yeah.
square hole or something. It just
Yeah.
doesn't. It's not.
Yeah.
And it comes through with to readers. So when you've got this female character that's just acting masculine and maybe she's spitting and cursing and just very uh, unnatural to how a woman should be and act. Of course, it's going to come off as unlikable because we all deep down we know that that's not how women are. That's not
Yeah.
our instincts is to act that way.
Well, this is the
Um,
I think if you know the actress Michelle Rodriguez, that's basically who she is in every single movie that she's in. She's this
it
tough,
really,
swearing, spitting,
yeah,
arm wrestling dudes,
yeah,
bandana on. It's like, oh man, to me that's I can see the wires, I can see the gears inside. You haven't successfully
yeah,
like I can see the stitching there. I can see the intent. I can see the kind of the gutty
yeah,
works of the story. I don't want to see it. You have to hide that. Give me a
yeah,
story and embed. What is it you're trying to say and embed it, but smoothly and
yeah,
gracefully and subtly inside of great a great story.
yeah.
Uh,
I actually have so my the fantasy book I have going on as a side project. Like my goal, or one of the goals for that one, is to write a female character that is, manages to be a hero without being like this masculine brat.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
um, kind of like, and Jeff Wheeler mostly accomplished that with a character in one of his books, and that always inspired me. It's like, wow, a female character I actually really enjoy.
that you
I
wouldn't
know it's written
hate
by
to read and you would
right,
actually enjoy writing. So
yeah.
so let's say that you've gone through this long process from start to finish. How long did it take to like first edition, first draft? When you the first time you said, "I'm done. This book is finished."
Oh gosh, I think altogether it was about 6 months. I think, which
Oh
is
wow.
pretty quick in hindsight. And part of that was because when I first started writing the book, I was in the middle of a job search. I was trying to find an overnight job.
Sure.
So I had more time on my hands. Um, and then the other part was I was working security, and I was just like staying up till from like 8 to 5 in the morning, the entire weekend to just
Shooting
writing.
bad dudes at work and stuff, firing your weapon and
Yeah, that's what we do in
kung
security.
fu kung fu dudes at work and stuff.
Yeah, it's just telling drunk natives they can't drink here.
Policing up the
Basically, what
area there in South Dakota. Are you?
yeah, in South Dakota. Yeah.
How's South Dakota, by the way? Is there a good environment, or like is there a peer group of writers or people that you interact with?
It's not so much. Most of the people in the area are in like Omaha or Minneapolis.
She's not doing open
There
mic
does just
nights out
happen.
there.
Yeah, I know one person in Sioux Falls just by chance who actually runs a very good. I think it's SFF Insiders. Runs a blog for indie fantasy and sci-fi. By chance, just happens to also be in the area, and so we've gotten coffee a couple times to talk, and that's been great.
Mm,
But outside of that, not really. Not the place to be if you're a writer. I don't think if you're looking for
inter-
other writers anyway.
interesting. It's not like New York City or whatever. They just go to the writing club and hang out or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Have a
There's
big
barely
support
social,
group of writers.
right?
Some successful, some failed. So you finished about 6 months. You get a first draft. How similar, like, so hold up in your left hand the first draft, hold up in your right hand the final draft. How similar or different are the two pieces of work in your left and right hand now?
Oh, very, very different. Completely different endings, completely different beginnings. The writing's better, more scenes, obviously. Very, very different. Like I said, my development liner pretty much taught me how to write with her feedback. So I was like embarrassed when I read my work after seeing what could be and what should be. So if I could go back and like, still maintain the current and final edition of Dierock, but also burn that first edition, I would do it. Just
Burn
want
them.
to
So the final
Yeah,
draft looks very
never happened.
look almost nothing. The characters are there, the general plot line is there. The way that you
Yeah,
present it
yeah.
is different.
It's more of like I would say the opening's a lot shorter. It's so originally the book opened up as Alice was arriving at Dierock.
Okay.
So everything prior to that in the book was actually written after um, I got my developmental feedback, and I feel like that's actually some of my strongest writing. Obviously, because that's where I kind of learned how to actually write.
Okay.
And then the book was like, I think I cut off about 20,000 words off the ending,
Okay.
and that got pushed into book two. So those are the biggest differences. There's like
Mm.
smaller differences in which I went through, and I would read scenes like, okay, this doesn't read properly. Or you mentioned earlier about how not like the character just can't say like, I'm angry, or like you can't say he's angry.
Yeah.
And that's a very good thing to mention. And I'm not saying I'm perfect about that, but one thing that I always remind myself as I'm writing is to describe how they're. You don't say that they're angry. You're describing what they look like, what they're doing, what
Correct.
action. Maybe they're slamming their fist down. Maybe their voice is changing or their face is contorting in some way.
Yes.
Um, and so I try to, if I can't get that down in the first draft, what I'll do is I go through in the second draft and I go through and I find those moments and I take it out. Okay, like he's not happy. I'm describing how he looks or what he's like. So putting in the context or the clues that you pick up on in person to look at somebody and immediately see that they're happy, right? Um, so that's a very important distinction too, is from going from that original version to the second version is
Yeah.
finding instances where I can improve on that.
A kind of a maturation process, so and then
Yep.
film and I suspect like once you get to the end of the book, then you go back and you think, well, now that I know I had a general idea of how the book would end. Now that I know actually how the book would end, I can insert little cookies throughout the book,
Mm-hmm.
little bits of foreshadowing throughout the book, so that I can kind of enrich the book in that particular way, add a little element here, add a little something there, you know, put a little secret or hint somewhere or something. And because
Yeah,
you
that's
didn't you didn't know that that was how it would end when you wrote that scene. You get to the end of the book, now you know how it ends, and you want to add a little something sprinkled throughout the book. Was there any process like that?
oh definitely, and then more so in book two now that I've like have the experience of the writing process. But yeah, you that's the nice thing about knowing that you don't have to release the book until you've decided it's ready, right? And so
Yeah.
I can um so my driving factor every time I write is just get a scene written, and then when I've start to finish done, then I can go back and I can like add things in from what I know, and like I have the characters' arcs in mind better, and I can see like, well, at this point in the story, this person should be feeling this way or that way, or
Mhm.
they need to hint towards this more. Um, I was actually giving somebody writing advice recently, and that was one thing I was telling them. It's like the story is not done until you say it's done. The important thing is just to get going
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just and then you can go back and you can add those things in. Like the when I first started writing Dierock, I put a lot of pressure on myself. It's like, well, how do I be brilliant? And I don't think I ever will be as a writer, but I can still like if I know what's going to happen and no one else knows, like what does it matter how long it takes me or when I go and do this or that. So
Mm.
um, that's
Getting it done
a
is the
very
main
important.
thing. The time it took you,
Exactly. You get it
yeah.
done, then you can go back and you can add in those details.
It's funny to when you're writing, who do you have in mind? Are you thinking of your audience? Are you thinking of yourself? Are you writing for you? Because so one of the things that strikes me is in general, like, why do we take the it's to me, it's like peeling my skin off. It's horrifyingly painful to the entire process of writing. Um, so it's like, why would I do that to myself? Why should I sit? Well, forget this. Close the computer, go outside and, run through the sprinkler. Yay. Go outside, do something, go camping. There's so many things that you could be doing. You're writing. And so it's like, it's a bit of a madness. What compels you to sit and be alone and do this? Some people say that, like, what was it? Maybe it was Michelangelo or something that said that there's a statue inside the piece of marble, and it is his job to figure out what the statue is and to release it from the marble, and it's already in there. And I'm not sure that I feel that. I don't know that it's actually there. It's just sort of creating it, but it is arduous and it's difficult and painful. Do you want people to read it? Do you care? You know, do you write it for them? Do you write it for you?
For me, it is mostly a selfish thing. Like it wouldn't really bother me at the end of the day if nobody wrote my book because or nobody read my book. It's Um,
Interesting. That's
because
wild.
these are things that, yeah, it's weird to think about, right? Obviously, we want the success, um, but like I mentioned earlier, that writing's like a release for me. It's um, you know, in the times that I do have some kind of quiet peace of mind, whether it's while I'm working or trying to sleep and not sleeping, my mind's just running wild with all kinds of things that I've absorbed throughout my life,
Yeah.
and in my head, it's just like it doesn't shut up. It's like, well, what if this or that? And writing's how you bring that to life, right? If not through other things like music or shows or anything like that. But um, for me, I have to keep the writer in mind and some or the reader in mind at some extent. But ultimately, it's I'd have a hard time writing if I was only doing that. Like it has to be selfish on some level, or else I'm not going to enjoy writing it.
Mm.
And if I'm not enjoying writing it, then no one's going to enjoy reading it. But
Sure, sure. I believe that.
yeah, and I really like the what you mentioned with Michelangelo about the releases. It's very true. I've spent my whole life trying to get things out of my head, and
Sure.
so when I sit down to write, it's not really painful. It's like it feels productive.
Okay.
Um, Whereas now, when I'm like trying to play video games, I feel like, man, I'm wasting my time. I'm not doing anything
Yes.
productive,
Yes.
and that hurts more. That hurts.
Yeah. That also
I
means
feel
you're
good when I'm there.
that also means you're getting older. Young
Yeah,
people have
that's right.
young people have no sense of time. When you get the
It's so
minute you're
true.
like,
Yeah,
holy Christ, because I see that still be like, hey, we're online, we're playing some video games. I'm like, in what world? In what world would
right.
I have a moment to play a video game? And if I was playing a
Yeah, I
video
want
game,
to.
yeah, I feel like I would feel terribly guilty. There's a long list of things that I need to do. So
Yeah,
so
it's tough.
you have a finished book, all right? So then what next? You've uploaded it and you're selling it through Amazon. Why did you choose Amazon? Did you explore different options? Did you kind of that seems to
Yeah,
be
I
the
did a lot of
default in a way.
research. Yeah, there's other options. Like I think Barnes and Noble has a self-publishing route, and Ingram Spark's another one. Some people will actually try to do all of them. I'm trying to expand, but I'm having issues with like different services have different formatting rules and things like
Mm.
that. They're not liking my manuscript. It's just not.
They don't
It's not
require
enough for
monogamy.
me. Yeah, it's like
Jeff Bezos
my
doesn't demand
manuscript.
your faithfulness.
Yeah, I'll upload my scripts to my manuscript to KDP and it's fine. I try uploading it to Barnes and Noble and it's like, the sizing isn't quite right. And it's like, well, what do you mean? They're the same size book. How could it be an issue? But anyways, um,
So it's a
but
formatting issue and some
KDP,
hoops you have to jump through, but you're thinking you could maybe do it.
yeah. And the other thing is that it's like everybody uses Amazon. I know it's like easy to hate, but if we're being honest, Amazon's just people buy everything from there now, especially books, right? That's been the big problem for
Yeah, it's
Barnes and
very
Noble.
easy.
Everyone's buying books on Amazon. I do it because I can't go to Barnes and Noble. Well, one, they're more expensive, and two, it's just like I have to make time to go there. Whereas if I order online, I can just bring it to me.
Yeah.
And then KDP's also, it puts you on Kindle Unlimited, which is where a lot of authors actually make their money. I don't yet, but that's the you get paid per page read, and that's really big
Oh,
for
damn.
authors these days. Yeah. So it was just I did all the research and I just found that it looked like the easier option.
Yeah.
And that's where most people are going to look for their books is on Amazon. So
Yeah. Interesting. I know that Amazon, like, I had a buddy who many who have uploaded books, self-published, and Amazon is the place. But they, you know, are making like $3 a book or less or something like that. Like, so you're not 3, $4 something. You're not making a lot of money. Like,
yeah, yeah, it makes sense, right? They're the ones printing it, so I get it. But it
sure,
just depends
sure.
on where you set the price too.
And that's kind of a sliding scale. You said it here. You're gonna the higher you go, the fewer books you might sell, the more money you make. What do you want to sell more
Right.
books
Yeah.
or per unit?
And for me, I just tried to do what it looked like everybody else was setting their books to, like an indie scene.
Yeah,
Because as a debut author, it's hard to ask people to spend, especially in today's economy, their hard-earned money on your book, right? They've never read anything by you. They don't know if it's going to be actually that good. Um,
So they're taking a chance, you
so
know?
exactly, and so I was like, well, I'm just going to be fair about this, and let's go with what everybody else in that kind of sphere is typically doing and making sales. So
Mm.
that was my guideline.
Tell me about the cover. The cover's really good. It's great.
Yeah,
It's
yeah. Nobody would be reading it if it weren't for the cover.
no,
Um,
no. So tell
that
me,
was a hard
who made the
process.
cover?
Was I had no word to it. So Rafael Andres made the cover. He's a designer. I found him on this site called Reezy,
Okay.
and yeah, I had no idea where to look or even how to get in touch with an artist for a good cover. So
Okay.
I just found this website where they just like they have an entire platform for artists and designers and editors and things like that for hire. And
What's
I
name the
really
website
liked
again? What was the name?
Reezy, Reedsy.
Okay.
Now I know how to like actually find artists to contact directly. So I don't really have to go that process again because it's a lot more expensive. But um, yeah, just found his work and sent him the what I was wanting, and it was a little bit of a process to get to where it was, but he was friendly and great to work with, and then he just he absolutely nailed it. It's an awesome cover.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
won't
And I
be
mean,
the same
it's
designer for book
classic.
two because it's too expensive, but the book two cover will be great too. It
Yeah,
is nice, yeah. And I wanted like a vintage look, so they nailed it.
it definitely has the vintage look. It's a great it's a great cover. Um, and don't judge a book by its cover. In this case, yes, judge the book by.
You should always
Judge,
judge books by your cover. It just not just in for literally for books, but just in general, please, people. Sometimes your
always.
instincts when you look at somebody are right, you know.
Mm. So once you want now you've written a book, you've uploaded it to Amazon, you got a great cover, and so here comes what you've described as the hardest part. So I've had this conversation with friends recently with Isaac Simpson, and also with my friend PCM Christ, who it's the notion of like the Emily Dickinson version versus the P.T. Barnum, the pure artist, sitting in your room writing poetry that you honestly don't really ever intend anyone to read. You're doing it purely for yourself. And in fact, at the time of your death, you just ask your sister to burn it. Okay. So that's just pure artist. On the other hand, you have like the promoter. Okay. Someone who's just like their art is promoting other artists. So to be able to make a scene, a spectacle, a splash, a buzz, or whatever they call it, the sizzle reel for you, or uh, promoting your work. So many times I think an artist um, has a kind of a genuine a shyness, which makes it difficult to kind of promote your own work. And then you have many, many examples, I guess, of people who are talentless hacks and who are good at only promoting. Their art is utter shit, but they're just so talented. Like P. Diddy, I always got the notion, like, I don't even know what he does. I don't even know what songs he sings other than like a cover of Sting song, but like all he's ever done, aside from apparently molesting children, which is horrifying, but all he ever does is just he's promoting other people's stuff, and in the background I'm like, yeah, yeah, that's the extent of his talent, but somehow he's managed to become quite successful of just promoting other people's stuff. So there's like true art in that as well, I guess. Where do you sit? Like, how do so you have a book, it's on Amazon, and then now what do you do?
Oh gosh, so the first 2 months, like after the pre-order sales that were just um, they basically family and friends, right?
Yeah,
I
well, you're
wasn't selling
lucky.
anything.
my family wouldn't
Yeah,
my family wouldn't bother.
yeah, I know. Well, yeah, I have those ones too.
Yeah,
But like
yeah.
my mom and my dad and my grandparents were all super excited about it and read it. But and they've done a lot of promoting, like handing them out and stuff like that. But
Oh,
I know it's sweet, and
that's
then the rest of
sweet.
my family. But yeah, those after those sales, it was just nothing. And I would go to Twitter, and I probably had like maybe 20 followers, and I was anonymous. I tried selling anonymously at first, um, and that was a disaster. Apparently, people don't want to buy your book unless like they see your face, or I mean, you have to be like a really good shit poster, maybe. I don't know. Either
Maybe.
way, nobody in the indie sphere wanted to interact with me when I was just like this. I think it was a picture of my boot or something, like on a hike in Iceland, and
Yeah, that's not
I
bad.
was, yeah, I know, but people wouldn't talk to me.
Yeah.
Um,
A Buddha in
it was
Iceland is
that's
not enough.
yeah, it was a beautiful photo. Anyways, uh, so that was the hardest part from ground up was even just within the indie sphere because the Twitter community for self-published authors is actually really big and pretty friendly for the most part.
Yeah.
Um, but it's actually harder to get into that circle than you would think.
Hmm.
And so they'll like kind of briefly welcome you in and interact with you, but there's like little clicks and it's hard to get a foot anywhere in there until
Hmm.
you start like
Hmm.
actively showing your face and things like that. And I'm a pretty private person. I don't like to take photos. I don't consider
Sure.
myself good on camera or on video. I've never just been like I'm trying to get going on Instagram, but it's like completely at odds with my nature, so it's been difficult. But um,
So you have the spirit of an
it,
artist you're producing, you have a more of a genuine or sort
yeah,
of honest approach to creating art. And then it's such a trick, to get it out there. You see people like some of the well-known
yeah,
guys on Twitter, or I keep calling it Twitter. I suppose I should call it X at some point, but the Delicious Tacos and that profile of guy who's putting their
yeah,
book out. And
yeah, Baltic and like yeah,
yeah, and you've got to be kind
yeah,
of unmerciful about it. Like, just that is your full-time job, is every single day posting it. And I've even seen like someone try to clap back at Delicious Tacos, like, wow, you've been promoting the same book for 10 years. He's like, okay, great, read it then. You just have to roll with the punches and just keep going. And it's like, should I
yeah,
should I promote my book again? Well, that's what it is. It's even if you feel a little kind of date rapey a little bit about pushing your book on everybody, but that's kind of the nature of the way it is, right?
yeah. I think men are better at that too, right? It's like the whole thing about guys will ask for promotion and women will type deal. The guys are very relentless about it. So, and not only that, but there's a lot of authors that have maybe a built-in base around just like they were already had a following from YouTube or maybe they were just a really good poster on Twitter. I don't know what you'd even call that.
Sure.
And then they write the book, and so they've got that to the ground running, and that's a very viable strategy if you're a promoter, if you have that personality.
Yeah.
Um, I struggled for a long time to make any interesting posts on Twitter, even on my personal accounts. But um,
Why? What is it about Twitter
I,
that you dislike?
oh no, I like Twitter a lot. I'm just a private person, number one, and number two. I've always found that whatever I have to say, people are already saying and saying it better, you know? So
Interesting.
it's like I could make a lot of political posts, but I already follow people that are saying everything that I think, like with way more clarity, you know.
Better to leave it
So
to them.
yeah, yeah. Like I don't want to be that annoying person that's just like cat turd or something and just putting out the most basic crap you've ever seen on Twitter. It's just like
Be,
it's like very obvious.
clickbaity
You get what I'm
stuff.
saying? Yeah, like Facebook level of it's like I don't think I have too much to say on certain subjects that's worth putting out there.
Hmm. Well, you said what you wanted to
On
say.
social.
It's called Dierock
Yeah,
88. You said a lot,
yeah. There
and
you go.
so what do you do? What is the strategy?
So after going, I don't know, a couple months with nothing, I was just like gonna move on and focus on book two and just forget about it, and hopefully it would just slowly find an audience. Because I don't know how to. I tried putting out posts where you're like, hey, this is my book, please buy it, and or try to describe it, or there'll be Twitter accounts that are like, hey, post your book and we'll retweet it, and those don't do anything really. And
Hmm.
um, I did finally get a little bit of attention for my cover from a very like upstart booktuber
Okay.
named Bibliotheory, and that was pretty big. Like that helped me get a little bit of attention.
Okay.
But ultimately, what did it was I was like just watching my son one day, and I just had this mental image in my head of like just taking my gun and like pointing it at my book, taking a picture of it. Like I was just gonna kill it, and
Oh no.
and so like and I'm one of those people sometimes on Twitter, like I just get a weird thought and I just go with it. Like I don't really like it is what it is, and put it out there. And so yeah, I did that. I grabbed my gun and I took a picture of me pointing my gun at my book, and I said like buy it or else or something like that.
Yeah.
And I put it
Hostage.
out there, and um that was like the start of me finally like starting to take off because people thought that
Res-
was like, really funny and really different.
and responded to that. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's kind
Threatening to shoot my book did it.
yeah, I think well, you just have to get a larger caliber pistol every time you go for it. You work your way
Yeah,
up
I
to a
need more
50
money for that
cal or something.
one.
Yeah. So what is the strategy going forward? Just sell one by one? Is there a book kind of a promotional thing? Is it just it's out in the world? If it sells, it sells. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Kind of leave it at that.
Well, networking's a big thing. As you get to know people, uh, there's a lot of opportunity there. That's the biggest thing is you got to talk to people. You got to reach out. And I haven't always been great about that because I've got a lot going on in my personal life. Sometimes I
Yeah,
don't want to think about promoting my book at all.
sure.
Um, and I'm very, very stretched thin because of my schedule. But um, yeah, it's I kind of got lucky in that I've had people just randomly message me and interested in my book in some way or some form. Like one of the random ones was like WBS Apparel, and those guys are really cool, and they just messaged me one day about my book, and now they're going to be um doing something down the line there.
Hey,
They
nice.
a bunch of guys bought copies, and which is very scary, right? I think the first when I finally started finding out people were reading my book, I wanted to puke. For like a week, I didn't write for like 2 weeks. I was
Oh,
just like, you push it, and then when people are finally reading, you're like, oh my god, this is awful. What are you doing? Don't actually read it. Um,
oh, so much like
I know,
sort of self-doubt, right?
I know. I was so nervous. So I'm still blown away when I get any kind of positive feedback because it's hard not to just in hindsight, like I should have done this, should have done this, could have been better. And it can be better, but it's always humbling to hear people like genuinely like it. Um, but anyways, so networking is a big thing. Is just continuing to meet people that have some kind of connection that can help getting your book out to a wider audience.
Sure. I mean,
And again, that really came about by chance. So
it's almost like a full-time job in and of itself.
yeah,
Writing
it
is
really
is one job, and promoting it and getting it out there in the world is another job entirely, and figuring out how to do that successfully. Um, yeah, I mean, I'll tweet sometimes, and it's just like zero, out in the void, and you start to think, well, like, Jesus, I've got like a couple of more than 3 or 4 followers. I should have like at least 3 people like it or whatever. And it's like, dude, I'm shutting it down, man. I can't handle this rejection. I'm gonna just
yeah.
get off Twitter. Fuck all these people. So
Yeah, it
I
was like that for me.
so I know that it's getting late over there, and we'll start to wind it down. I can see it's getting a little dark. Leave
Yeah,
us
sorry.
leave us with a few final thoughts. What would you recommend to someone who's thinking about writing? What would be sort of your advice to them?
I would say you really have to just do it. I mean, there's some authors that really like to that got started doing the prep work where you're listening to other authors, and that's fine. Use all the resources you can find on like YouTube, Brandon Sanderson, and things like that. But it doesn't matter if you're not just sitting down and writing. When I first started and I had a lot more time, I was making myself write 1,000 words a day, no matter what, even if I hate
Discipline.
what I hated what I wrote. Yeah, discipline. You can be once you've learned to trust yourself, discipline doesn't matter as much. Like with book two, I can go a week without writing, and yeah, it doesn't feel great, but I know I'm gonna get there. I've already written one book. What's another one, right? But when you're writing that first story, you have to be disciplined. and that's a battle with yourself, right? It's then
So
you also
right.
need to
So just right.
you, you gotta just jump right in. Again, forgive yourself for it not being great because it doesn't have to be done until you say it's done. And you're not going to be able to improve it until you have it written, right? You can improve it in your head, but until it's like typed down, it's not going anywhere. Um, so those are the two things is just be forgiving with yourself so you can allow yourself the freedom to become the writer that you want to be.
Hmm.
And then just to get it down. It's not gonna write itself. We can
Unfortunately.
fantasize of like waking up and you went into some like zombie state and finished it, but that's not how it works. You really have to put in the work and sit down and do it.
Chat GPT is not going to write your novel for you.
No, it
Not
really won't.
not yet anyway. Would you like to give
Right.
any final shout outs or say hello to anyone? Is there anyone on X,
Uh,
friends or family that
yeah.
you
Well, I already said them at WS Apparel because they've been fantastic and their support and have allowed my book to reach so many new people. It's kind of funny how right wing Twitter just kind of found me, like unintentionally, really. But they've been great. And my buddies, Dennis Yellen, who has a what I consider to be the best work of poetry in the
Oh,
modern
nice.
era, out
Nice.
right now, Ouroboros. If you're looking for like a masculine, historical, classical feel of poetry, I highly recommend Ouroboros by Dennis and Alex Trevino. He's another friend who was published before I was and gave me a lot of advice and help early on. He's got his Sirens of the Gartha series out now, and William Hastings has been great. He's got a couple series out. So those guys I have to shout out because they're I consider them good friends.
Hey, good.
Um,
We'll link them below in
yeah, absolutely.
the final video.
Yeah,
Shelby, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. You're very busy and
yeah.
you've got
Thank you.
a million things going on, but we definitely appreciate your time. We love meeting new writers and talking about the process, painful though it may be. Um, appreciate you. And what will be the title, I think, of the book two?
It's called Paradiso.
Paradiso. It's like a Dante situation happening. I mean, going from the inferno to paradise here. That sounds good. How many books total do you think in the series?
I'm working on the outline for book three right now. I really didn't want to go beyond three, but we'll see. It just depends on how much it takes to get to where I know it's going.
Yeah. Well, trilogy is always a nice round number.
Would be nice. Yeah,
Hey, Shelby, thank you so much for your time. You have a great night.
absolutely.
We appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you so much. You as
All
well.
right.
Bye.
Bye bye.